The years 1970 and 1992 were truly amazing years in comic book history. Why? Because I thought the intro sounded cool. I wasn't alive in either one, so I actually don't know, but what I do know is that this is going to be a fun video, because we're going to be talking about blackface. Kind of. Even though I could have easily spent 30 minutes just saying, I thought that would be boring and a bit of a drag, so instead, I chose to just share a laugh with you all about two truly terrible stories. So sit back and relax, but not too much, because it is still blackface, you know, so maybe relax about this much? Anyway, let's just get started. Every so often, a hero that the people deserve arises from our ranks and attempts to do the impossible, end racism. Kendall Jenner, Joyner Lucas, just a couple of names from a long list of individuals that made a brave sacrifice for the world. But way before them came a young reporter from the city of Metropolis, Lois Lane. The year was 1970. On November 10th, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane issue 106 was released. In this comic, Lois is on the hunt for a Pulitzer Prize-worthy story. She finds it, but the only way she can get the information to write it is by becoming a black woman and infiltrating the neighborhood known as Little Africa. Already, there's just so much that is hilarious and really confusing to me about this entire thing. The name of this storyline is I Am Curious, Black, in parentheses, and for the life of me, I could not figure out why the word black was in parentheses, but eventually, I discovered that the title was inspired by a 1967 Swedish erotic drama film titled I Am Curious, Yellow, in parentheses. You would think this would be a strange source of inspiration for the title of something geared towards children, but there's also an episode of Ed, Edd n Eddy named I'm Curious, Ed. And now that I think of it, that really isn't saying much, considering some of the things that happened in that show. Back to the comics. It's not rare for comic book writers to try and be progressive in the stories they tell, but I feel like it's a rare thing for it to be done well, especially in the 70s. During this decade, an effort was being made to make movies, cartoons, and comic books more diverse. Now, I want you to think about some of your favorite shows from when you were a kid. Do you remember that one episode with a weirdly serious tone that was basically a lesson on racial tolerance?
It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
This story is kind of a failed attempt at that by a legendary writer whose last name has a suspicious pronunciation, Robert Kanigher. You can tell that his idea for this story was well-intentioned. It's just really tone-deaf. In the beginning, Lois takes a cab to the heart of Little Africa to get information for her article about, well, black people, I guess. They don't ever specifically say what she's writing about, but here's where things get interesting. When she tries to talk to the locals, the kids walk away from her, she gets doors slammed in her face, mothers wheel their babies away from her, and even a blind old lady hears her voice and goes, oh nah. We just need to take a quick pause and appreciate how amazing the pencil work from Werner Roth is here. Everyone in the neighborhood is just not entertaining Lois at all, and you can see it clearly on their faces. My personal favorite is this baby. She doesn't have to say anything for you to know that she's thinking, man, would you please back the hell up? Little Africa is straight out of a blaxploitation movie. There's a pimp in a diner, people playing dice on a corner, and a guy giving a speech on the street that is for some reason specifically about Lois. Look at her, brothers and sisters. She's young and sweet and pretty, but never forget, she's whitey.
Move this man!
Then Lois just goes, he's wrong about me, but right about so many others. Truly inspirational stuff. Just like normal, when she needs Superman the most, he pops up. And she gets him to fly her to the Fortress of Solitude where he keeps the Plastimold. See, the cover kind of tricks you into thinking that Superman just happens to have a machine specifically for turning people black. But actually, the Plastimold is only a plastic surgery machine that has the capability of changing your skin color for 24 hours. It was made by a Kryptonian surgeon named Darnell. I know the name has French origins, but everyone I've ever met named Darnell is the same skin tone as the Lois we get for most of this issue. Superman flips the switch and she transforms. From here, Lois Dolezal heads back to Little Africa, but the same cab driver she paid the first time drives past her for obvious reasons. This panel gives us one of the worst lines I've ever read. Benny gave me my first lesson in the meaning of black. She has to take the bus, and the first thing she does when she gets there is literally save the neighborhood. From a fire, but still. A few pages later, she runs into the guy that was giving his Lois diss speech on the street earlier. He hits on her again, but is interrupted when some kids go into an alley to buy drugs. Then he runs behind them to give the drug dealers a piece of his mind. Now, remember, this is the 70s, but these are clearly 1930s thugs. They don't warn him before they start blasting. He gets lit up, but Superman shows up just before they aim their guns at Lois. The group flies to the hospital, but the hospital doesn't have Dave Jones's blood type on hand. And guess who's a match? Lois gives him blood, but while he's recovering, she has time to ask Superman a stupid-ass question. Would you marry me if I stayed black? He does the guy thing too and ignores what she's really asking and says, "You're asking me that question? I'm not even from this planet. How could I be racist?" Then a few moments later, her skin goes back to normal and he says, "Yes, Lois, you're white again." And then there's this masterpiece here. This is the face of a man who should be developing paranoia in real time. To him, this should be the equivalent of a "they live" moment. Who else is pretending to be another ethnicity? Now, as the story wraps up, you have to wonder, did Lois get her story? Did she actually learn anything from this experience? Even though it seems like the answer is no, pay close attention here. Do you see the way that she approaches Dave to shake his hand?
Come on, brother. What's up, fam?
She was not doing that before she became a black woman. Look at the approach. Look at this form. It's just
full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
Now, we move ahead to 1992. Comics were edgy, and the Punisher was all the rage. During his 7-part Final Days storyline, Frank is sent to prison, but the sentence is just a setup for him to be jumped by the other inmates, including one of his few living enemies at the time, Jigsaw. Jigsaw had his face disfigured by Frank some years prior, and wanted revenge, so he returns the favor. The Punisher uses his injuries to escape prison, but now he's on the run and in desperate need of some plastic surgery. He seeks out the help of Dr. Melinda Brewer, a former surgeon turned sex worker and heroin addict. Dr. Brewer had developed a plastic surgery procedure that involved messing with skin pigments and melanin, and you can see where this is going. 5 days after the procedure, Frank wakes up as confused as I'm sure the readers were at the time. He was now a black man. Well, you said you didn't want anyone to recognize you. Writer Mike Barron swears that when he wrote this conclusion, he was just following the instructions of his editor, Donald Daly. This was Barron's final issue on the piece, and there's no telling why he might have wanted to leave, but I think we can make a pretty good assumption. Personally, I wouldn't want my name anywhere near this story, and I could have a pretty good chance of getting away with it. Barron left the plot for the rest of the storyline to the writer of a then upcoming Luke Cage series, Marcus McLaurin. The recently melanated Frank Castle heads to Chicago, and his welcome to the Windy City is just perfection. "What are you doing in this fine car, boy?" "What's the matter? Cat's got your tongue?" "Maybe the coon got his tongue." These cops do not like Frank because he is a black man now. "I had no patience for bigots before. Now that I'm black, I don't like it any better." He makes the mistake of fighting back, and what you would expect to happen, happens. Luke Cage comes flying in out of nowhere with a sick move. This book is now a crossover to advertise Mark McLaurin's new Luke Cage series. Frank Castle, he goes by Frank Rook now. Frank Rook and Luke Cage, two of Marvel's most popular black superheroes, getting together to beat up crackheads and stick it to the man. If the Lois story's message was, we're all the same on the inside, the message of this one is, Frank Castle will kill you if you are a criminal. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. There's no attempt to teach you a major lesson here, honestly. For the most part, it's just action. But when the story does try to pass off a message, it's about as deep as a kiddie pool. Frank hires Luke to help him find a stash house where he's keeping money and guns. But they find out that the building is being used as a stronghold for drug dealers. Issue 61 is titled Crackdown, and the newly formed duo is going to clean up the neighborhood. Frank poses as a crack connoisseur that's interested in purchasing some of the finest rock that money can buy from a trap house. The problem is, he looks like a cop, and these guys aren't going for it, so he gets to punishing. One thing to note here though, this is no longer the Punisher. Frank makes that crystal clear and reminds us several times. Frank makes it up to the top floor, only to discover that the person responsible for pushing drugs into the community is a white man named Mr. Rudy. Is this cliche now? Yeah, it is. Issue 62 is cleverly titled Fade to White. This is where Frank's plastic surgery begins to wear off, because Marvel wanted to move on as quickly as possible and forget that this ever happened. His skin tone goes from Sammy Sosa to Sammy Sosa. Frank Rook is just a man, a soldier without war, a white black man, kind of like the Black Bomber, but we all know who did it first. He gets lighter and lighter as the chapter continues until he looks like a biracial version of Two-Face before becoming his normal shade again, and revealing that he was the Punisher this entire time. Now this story has some pretty outlandish things in it, but I honestly think the worst part of it is the way Luke says the word boys here with 2 extra E's. It's just offensive to my eyes, and cringy. The first time I saw it, I kind of just shrugged it off like, I know people used to say boys like that back in the day, but it doesn't fit here. Maybe it was a mistake? But then those 2 extra E's pop up again, and I hate it even more. If you enjoyed the video, it would be super dope if you could leave a like. And make sure you hit the sub button so you get notified when my next video drops. Thanks for watching. Peace.